Welcome to the Spirit of a Badass, where we celebrate stories of courage, hope, and resiliency. I'm your host, Alecia Jacobson. Welcome to today's show, Badasses. I am so glad that you are here. I have a guest on with me today that I know that you are going to love her story. I feel like I've had a lot of people on lately that I wanted to connect with like a couple years ago, and it's now time and it's here. And I'm really excited for you to hear her story. Her name is Sara Alvarado, and she is a writer, entrepreneur, and fierce advocate for racial justice in real estate who believes that the way to handle challenges in life and business is to show up authentic, bold, vulnerable, and always ready for fun. Sara published her first memoir, Dreaming in Spanish, an unexpected love story in Puerto Vallarta in 2023. She is also the author of Racial Justice Toolkit for Real Estate Professionals and a Guide for Change Agents. Sara is the co-founder and director of Own It, Building Black Wealth, a groundbreaking initiative working to increase generational wealth in Black and Brown communities throughout home ownership. Through her speaking and workshops, Sara creates awareness and inspires change with her straight talk and loving ways. She spent 20 years as a real estate broker. Her husband, Carlos, now leads their team, Alvarado Group, at Compass. Sara loves dancing, family fun, travel, challenging the status quo, and writing. Welcome, Sara.
Hey, I'm so excited to be here.
Me too. I said that I was going to kind of share where I heard about you, and we're connected on social media, so I know kind of who you are out there. We live in the same community, but I'm a podcast person, and there are two podcasts that I listen to every week. On Monday, I drive carpool, and I listen to these podcasts, and I'm listening to my podcast, and I listen to Maddie Murphy, Cosmic RX, every week. And when she said your name, I was like, wait a second. I know like who this is. And not like, I listen to podcasts all the time, but she is weekly, I wait for this podcast to drop, but she's not doing one this month. She did one at the beginning. And I'm like, okay, I need March to be here because I need to listen to this podcast. And she interviewed you, and I'm listening to it, and I'm like, I want to have you on. And that's when I reached out to you. I want people to hear your story. You are an inspiration. And you have a message that really hits home with people, and it touches people and will create that ripple effect of change. So I'm so glad that you are here. One, that's so cool that you are on her podcast, because I don't know her at all, but I feel like, you listen to these, you feel like you know. And I know you were in a group with her and you were connected to her somehow.
I'm total hardcore fan of Maddie, Cosmic RX, and all things astrology, but also just the way she delivers. And as like a white woman astrologist, she gets it in terms of privilege and understanding the dynamics in so many ways, which is hard to find in the astrology world.
It's funny, the two podcasts I listen to weekly are astrology podcasts.
Are they? So you're an astrology junkie.
Oh, totally. Yes. And I know enough that I don't know enough, but I definitely follow it, and I try to kind of align things. Like I was telling somebody yesterday, I'm like, well, Mars is still in retrograde, so we have another week of this. And they kind of looked at me like, what?
So what are your top three?
So I am Taurus, Virgo.
Awesome. So earthy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I'm a Pisces, Gemini.
Okay.
So like I have the rising and my moon sign are both Gemini.
Okay.
Yeah. And it's my season.
I don't know a lot. But
well, you must know. I bet you know a lot more than you.
I dabble. I like to know, what's going to happen out there in the world. So I'm kind of like, okay, I'm ready for this wave. I'm ready for March.
What I really love, Maddie has one about moon signs and how knowing your child's moon sign really can help you parent them better.
Did not know that. I will have to look into that.
I think there's you can probably search in the podcast, like moon sign for children, or like there's a number of podcasts that will just dive into that specific topic. And then you can look up your kid's chart and find out their moon sign. And like, you've got some golden tips.
My daughter's a Virgo also, and my mom is a Capricorn. And I kind of didn't put together those two things. And when I realized just a couple months ago, I was like, oh, this makes so much more sense now. The dynamics when I was a kid growing up.
Yes.
And it's kind of like, oh, now I get it.
I love astrology. Okay.
Yes.
We
Okay.
could talk about that for an hour, but we probably shouldn't.
Absolutely. And I don't know enough to carry that conversation past where we are. So we need to dive into you. All right. You are here. I gave your bio. You are an author. What brought you into kind of writing that story? And what is your story that led up to that?
Okay. Deliciousness. So the book Dreaming in Spanish I've always wanted to write a book. Like, I love writing. I journaled so much. And so it was like I was in the business world 2002 until 2013, not writing, not journaling, not honoring my own creative spirit. And in 2013, I started working with a life coach and like whispered, I really want to write a book. And she just kept encouraging me. And I started a blog that no one had access to except her. Like, it was just baby steps, right? And I was torn between like what kind of book to write. And based on my business trajectory and my community work, I felt like I should write a book about XYZ. But I kept coming back to like, I really want to tell this story. And so I just got brave and said, fuck it. Like, it doesn't make sense to write this story as it relates to my career trajectory, but life doesn't make sense. And that is basically what this book really is about. Is you think you have these plans and you think you know what's best or which way to go. There's this push, and really it's about being in co-creation with the universe. And if the signs keep coming to write this book, then why do I think I know what's best? So I went with it. It was COVID. And so I had some time to be at home writing. My kids were older at that point too. And so I dove in. It really was hard to write because it starts at a place where I was struggling with drugs and alcohol and sex addiction stuff. It was more power dynamics and a lifestyle. Like, I feel like addiction is a symptom of trauma. So when we actually focus on the trauma, the addictions can fade away or be dealt with better. I'd had a number of sexual assaults growing up, and then it was in 1999 and I was drugged and raped and clearly in a horrible spot. And I was like, I can't keep living like this. Like, I can't. So I got a plane ticket and went to Mexico. And I figured I just needed to be by the ocean and I needed to heal. And I brought a book about addiction by Deepak Chopra, and I brought Conversations with God, that book. So those were the two books that I had when I went down there. I was kind of like a spiritual quest. And I was like all about, how do I get better? How do I take care of myself? How do I be if I'm not this person that I, come to be? I was 24 at the time. And within a couple of months of being there, I found English speaking AA meetings. And then I accidentally met Carlos, like not intending. Like, I was like, no men in my life. I thought he was gay at first. So I was like, okay, he's cool. Like,
You're safe.
Yeah, he's a safe one. So we became really good friends. And then clearly he wasn't gay. And so we fell in love, and that really threw me off my focus, which was, this is what I'm here for. I'm here to take care of me. I'm not here to be in a relationship. But it was such a loving, nurturing, different kind of relationship. And there's a lot of journal entries where I was fighting with myself to like, but, that conversation in the head. December 15th is when I went to Mexico, but it was 1999. Everyone was freaking out about Y2K, right? I met Carlos the end of January of 2000, which was the same week that I went to my first AA meeting. My mom came to visit, so she got to meet Carlos in March, and I got pregnant in May.
Oh, hot damn.
And that obviously changed everything.
Yeah.
Meaning Carlos changed a lot, and getting pregnant changes everything. He knew I was pregnant before I did. Like, he grew up with 7 sisters and was kind of in the process of raising his nieces and nephews. Like, he's been around kids, like, just knew way more. I was not in a place to become a mother at that point in my life. So he was like, I think you're, and I was like, no, I'm fine. So he was like, okay, at one point, like, do you want to go to a clinic or do you want to just get a pregnancy test? And I was like, fine, we'll go to a clinic. me not understanding what a clinic in Mexico is either, right? Like in my mind, a clinic is what I grew up with. So we went to this clinic and all they did was take my blood. And then they had me come back in an hour and they gave me an envelope. And then in the envelope, like that, like you don't meet with a doctor or a nurse or anyone. So when we went back to get the results, like they handed me this envelope and I was like, what am I supposed to do with this? And Carlos was like, well, now we take the envelope to the doctor. I was like, what? Like my destiny is in this envelope and I'm going to like go, no. So like right there, I opened it and it said positivo. And I just like burst into tears. And because I had been working so hard on connecting with spirit and like, okay, how do I be better? What do I do? You know, I surrendered and I was like, okay, God, like you clearly know what needs to happen for me next. This is nothing I would have ever planned. I don't have insurance. Like I'm teaching English, making $5 an hour. I just met this guy, but I'm just going to like, it was a moment of surrender. And my mom was always like, oh, God only gives you what you can handle. It's a terrible saying.
Yes.
I hate it, really, honestly.
The sort of like, let's try to make you feel better. In reality, you're like, fuck that.
Yeah, I don't want to be strong. I didn't know. Please, come on.
This is not the time.
I think because I was on this spiritual path, it was easier for me to surrender. So I did. And that's where things shifted. And actually, anytime I'm faced with something where I'm like, this doesn't make sense. I don't know how to handle this. This is my evidence. Like I can handle it. I don't need to know what the outcome's going to be. This is what life is. It's full of surprises. So why am I surprised that there's another surprise? Like this is it. So now how am I going to handle it? And obviously Alex wanted to be born and the universe wanted me to be with Carlos. And, you know, we've been together 25 years this August. So that was like the first half of the book, just in terms of like the turmoil of how do you change your life when you don't know what you want to change it into, to then having something happen that changes your life and rolling with that.
I'm really interested in that, which is interesting that this is where I'm being pulled to, but how was it writing all of that? And how did you prepare to kind of go through? Because that's a lot. It's very heavy and it's very romantic all at the same time.
You know, okay, two things. The question was, how was it writing it? And how do you prepare for that? So I'm going to answer two questions. One of them is, I didn't know it was a love story until like the fifth or sixth draft, when I had an editor that I was working with be like, I think this is a love story, Sara. I was like, it is? And for me, it's a love story with myself and with Carlos, and there's a thread with my mom, but I never intended to write a love story, right? I was more, I thought I was writing, it was memoir, right? Is it just overcoming tough times? And then when she was like, it's a love story, that just resonated. Maybe it just resonated with my Pisces romantic heart.
Goosebumps when you said
right?
That. I mean, the fact that there's so much trust involved. Like okay, I'm going to surrender here. I struggle with the word surrender. It's a very tricky.
Let's talk about that.
Yeah. I've talked about it a little bit on here. It makes me feel, even the word surrender makes me like, oh, let go of that control. Like, no, thank you. But that is, I mean, when you're saying that it's a love story, that's a lot of that kind of trust and surrender of,
how does co-creation feel for you?
Co-creation with
the universe, spirit.
Yeah. Tight. Makes my throat tight. My like throat gets very like, ooh, it gets on my control button, which I'm working on. It's a process.
It is a process. And like for me, getting pregnant so unexpectedly and then starting this new life, and not that it was super easy at all. Obviously it was really, really hard. So maybe it was just like the trusting that I don't know what's best for me. And because I was in such a horrible place of knowing that I wasn't taking care of myself. I was in very self-destructive situations on a regular basis. And maybe there was a comfort of trusting right? Which can sound like surrender, but I'm a go-getter. When I want to make something happen, I will make it happen. So surrender to me isn't giving up. It's acknowledging that there's no point in me attaching myself to an outcome. But I'm still going to go after stuff. And then if it doesn't happen the way I thought it would happen, then I roll with it. Like, so that's how I play with surrender and co-creation. Okay, so the second part of your question is the writing process. When I jumped into this book in 2020, I had been writing on Facebook for a long time at that point, very openly. And the Me Too movement and the Brock Turner case really messed me up. Not in a bad way, just like it brought up stuff that I thought I had healed from. And healing is a process. So I had been working with my therapist, just in general, like I have an amazing therapist. And the Brock Turner case, like that brought up a lot for me. I was in her office about that. And all of that I was writing about before I started writing the book. So by the time I got to writing the book, I had been doing a lot of, like it just poured out of me. I used a lot of journals to write the book and it was fun. So at that point, it wasn't challenging. There were a couple of challenging points when it was in the process with beta readers, where there was one part of the book where I'm talking about one of the earlier sexual assaults. And one of the beta readers in the side notes wrote, "This seems bigger than you're giving it space for." I don't know exactly how she wrote it, but she was calling me out on the fact that I was diminishing a really horrific experience in my life, which is what a lot of survivors do. Like, how do you get through something? Is it's not as bad as it is because you have to get through it. And so then when you have the capacity to acknowledge how bad something was, is how you can work through it. That's not a bad thing. Like, there's no judgment that I was doing it right or wrong. But because we live in this world where perfectionism and this need to do things right and wrong is so intense and ingrained in us, that I did feel like, well, I don't want to be a victim. I want to be a survivor. Therefore, it has to look this certain way. So to answer the question, which is a really hard question because it's so layered, because the book, takes so long to write, I would say for the most part, it was an opportunity to have space for pausing. So like at that moment when she named that, I knew I needed to unpack some of it. And so, I paused the book and I unpacked it and I worked through it and I rewrote it, but I rewrote it for me. Because at that point, when you're in the beta reader process, a beta reader is like the person that's reading it to give you feedback on how it's received, right? Like I write for myself and the first draft is really for self and it's part of the healing process. And then the editing is for the reader. And if the reader catches something that I haven't really worked through, now I got to go back and work through it. And that's more important, quite honestly. But it's also just a completely different, they're two different things.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Oh, absolutely. And I can just, this is like me imagining, like they write this and then it's like oh shit. Because you're thinking, I've done this, I've done the work. And then they're like, oh, here, this. And it's like, okay, in therapy, like I can just imagine like, here is something that needs to be. I love that you paused it. I love that it wasn't this rushed or you even, this is where your co-creation comes in that you talk about, because you're not looking for the final outcome. You're looking for the process of it and giving yourself the space to be in wherever you're at in that moment.
Yeah, because people write books different ways, right? Like I wanted to write the book before I thought about how it would be published or who, like any of that. Whereas some people write a couple chapters and then they write a proposal and then they go and try and find an agent before they even write the book. But I felt like I was still uncovering the story that wanted to be written. And I also didn't want the stories to die with me. I did feel a sense of urgency for that. When you have like a bucket list thing where all of a sudden something happens and you're like, oh, this needs to move from like fourth to first. I was at that place, but I think I also just honored so deeply the healing process. And I was done with the pushing and the rushing,
Yeah. Did you have, I know that journaling and writing in itself is a creative form of kind of letting things pour out of you. But were there other ways that you unearthed and unlocked bits so that they could be put on the page?
I love working out. So like there were times when I would publish a blog post that was really personal or even a Facebook post and I would have to run. Like I would literally have to go physically run. But I don't really have any other artistic methods. I talk to process. So talk therapy actually works really well with me, and friends, reading, listening to podcasts, reading other people's stories, all of that. Yeah. Are you a writer?
No, it's so interesting because I always tell people when I'm working with them, because journaling is something that gives people so much insight and takes that time to pause. And most everyone I work with spends their morning or evening taking some time to pause and journal. I struggle with it so much. I have my art that I have started kind of painting, watercolor painting, nothing great because I'm really a terrible artist, but I just like draw circles and stuff. But a lot of what I do is talking. Like this is my form of when I get on the mic by myself or things like that. Yeah, no, I've thought of writing a book before. It's been on my mind, but I think it would have to be in a different format where I tell the story and I think it's a ghostwriter or something where they write it.
I thought about that too. And this is because I'm ADHD. Like blog post, sure. But a whole book?
That seems daunting.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's possible.
Yeah. It's on my list.
So I'm always of the mindset of like, what calls to you is what you're meant to do. I mean, you're a coach, so this is all in your realm. Like jealousy, I feel like is a message from God. Like I love jealousy. Like anytime I'm like, oh, that person, and I'm like a little jealous, I'm like, that's what you want. You can have it. It's just showing you what's possible. Like it's not a scarcity issue. It's an abundance issue. Because I've never been jealous of someone who can fix cars. I think noticing what we lean towards in that jealousy way. I don't know. I've had fun with that.
Yeah, following that thread of what's
possible
up in me. Mm-hmm.
Right. Like if you've always been like, oh, a book, maybe, then the minute you say, oh, but it's too hard or I can't, then that's the different message that's just in the way of what's possible.
Mm-hmm. And more like, how can I?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or interesting. Maybe that is in my future. Like I don't need to like go after it right now, but I can leave space for it.
Yeah. Yeah. It was sort of like a not right now thing. I wanted to do it well. I wanted to do a lot. I went through when my time where everything was very intense and my world was falling apart. I was like, oh, I can do an Ironman and I can do this and I can do this. And that was kind of in that space of, I should write a book. And now I'm like, girl, you need to put the brakes on, kick your feet up a little bit here, and let's take it one step at a time. All right. Let's go into the second half of your book and your story.
Yes. That runs into all of the challenges and struggles with being a young new mom in a foreign country, in a new marriage, different religions, different cultures, and being a white person in a Spanish-speaking brown world. There was a lot of internal moments of perspective shifting, what I thought I knew, what I needed to learn. It was really hard. It was really, really hard. Carlos and we ended up getting married. So I found out early June that I was pregnant. And at that point I was probably like 8 weeks pregnant. And we had a family reunion trip that my grandma it was like one of her bucket list life dreams was to have all of her kids, 3 kids and all the grandkids go to Italy and stay in like some gorgeous villa. And that was in July. So I get home mid-June. I'm newly pregnant, have no clue anything about one of the things I was so mad about that clinic was that there were no brochures. I was like, I need a brochure. I'm so American. Like I'm so used to life a certain way. Right. And so, I get back to Madison, we're there for a couple of weeks and I'm like reading all the books, what to expect when you're expecting, or the whatever that book is, the What to Expect When You're
Yes,
Expecting.
that's what it
Yeah,
is. I
yeah,
had
that's
that.
what it is.
Yes.
Yeah. I did like the 1998 version. And at that point I was like, okay, we're going to get married. And I'm not the kind of person that like is traditional at all. In fact, like before I met Carlos, I was really like, I don't think I'm going to get married. Like, I can't imagine staying with the same person forever. Like, we're constantly changing. How does that even make sense? So it was interesting that I was so clear, like, nope, we're getting married. So August 5th was the date we picked. He was going to fly to Madison 10 days before the wedding. And we went on this 2-week trip to Italy with my grandma. Maybe it was 10 days, and planned a wedding within 6 weeks.
And you're pregnant. And that's like the time where your brain is like scrambled.
Basically, I was like, I didn't care about the wedding that much. I just wanted to be married. But of course, my parents cared, and they wanted it to be a certain way. And I did want, some of my friends and family there. And that wedding, there was 100, it was at my parents' house. They had a house in Richland, in like the country in Richland Center. There were 100 of my white family and friends, and there were 2 people from Carlos. It was his mom and his sister that were actually able to come. His best man wasn't able to come. So it was not an equitable wedding in any sense of the imagination. So I learned a lot through that process, just in terms of like what I was trying so hard for it to be a bilingual place for us to, like, we had an English speaking person that marries you, and then a translator who spoke Spanish. But there was the culture, like I was focused on the language, not the culture. And I was focused on having it be not a religious experience. It was about love and this baby and our new family, which really disregarded a lot of people in our family and in Carlos's family. Like, we could have done it differently to honor, but because Carlos was like in Mexico while I'm planning this, and he's just like, whatever. So he comes up 10 days, meets my dad and my sister. He had met my mom, but met my family 10 days before the wedding, which was terrifying for him, and also turned out to be wonderful. And then we flew back to Mexico and got an apartment, and then just started the process of like, how do we become a family and then have this baby? And at that point it was like however many months until Alex was born the end of January. Yeah. So it was very terrifying. I don't know how else to explain it. It was very scary. I had no idea what I was doing. I didn't have any friends there. Carlos's family, they were busy. I had gotten my undergrad degree in Spanish, so I was very comfortable and fluent in speaking Spanish. But having the experiences, like you speaking your native language, there's just nothing else like it, right? And there were definitely times where I just wanted to talk to someone in English because my brain was so tired too, and my body was tired.
Wow. Okay. There's so much. You are how old? 24?
I was 25 at that point.
25. I mean, that's a baby. You're a baby. And you're navigating all of it's so interesting. You said you got your undergrad in Spanish. Did you know, you said you went there, essentially brought your 2 books on the beach. I need to like be sober. And did you know that you had any idea that you were going to be going to move someplace using this language?
So I knew after I wasn't really good in the academic world. So I kind of just needed to graduate, and I had done a study abroad in Spain, and it was really cool to be able to communicate with people in a different language. Like, I saw how it unlocks really understanding culture by knowing the language. So I was like, I'll just get my Spanish degree.
Yeah.
And then when I went to live in LA for a bit, thinking that I would use my Spanish more, but it's very segregated. I wasn't able to use it to the extent I wanted to. So after the rape, and I was trying to figure out what to do and where to go, like I needed to get out of Madison. That's a whole nother story that's in the book. But basically, I was going to go to India, and things shifted. And so I was like, I don't know where to go. And my mom was like, well, if you knew, what would you pick? I'm like, but I don't know. And so then she did this practice with me on how to listen to your body. She was like, your body knows. So we did this thing, and I was like, well, I guess I could go to Mexico and practice my Spanish. because I had always, for me, dreaming in another language really means you have the fluency. And I wasn't at that point, even though I could write and read and understand Spanish really well. I still spoke it like I learned it at the University of Minnesota in Minneapolis, right? So I was like, I feel like if I could get immersed in it and if I could dream in it, then I would really know it. So I was like, I could go to Mexico. And my mom was like, all right, well, then let's pick a place on the map. And I was like, well, I want to watch the sun set into the ocean. So let's go to the Pacific side. And I want to be in the same time zone as you. And so we picked Puerto Vallarta. I didn't know anything about it. I didn't know that there were mountains there. It was amazing.
What a gift from your mom. I mean, I can't imagine. I have ones that are scooting off into college now and one in college. And I can't imagine having you experienced everything in life and then her sitting and teaching you how to feel what's in your body and like your body knows and then saying, fly, baby, fly. Like having that dynamic and that gift.
So I don't know because I have a 20-year-old and a 24-year-old right now. And I think about this all the time. Just experienced a horrific tragic, like it was traumatic as hell. And all I would want to do with my child was like, snug, like you're not you need to get better. Like I will help you get better. And so for her to trust my process, because I was like, I need to go. I just need to go. And for her to trust that journey for me is beyond, which helps me be a better mom. Because then like I had my 18-year-old, when he graduated from high school, he was like, I'm out. And he packed his truck up and he drove to a couple of different places. And I just kept thinking about my mom. And I was like, okay, she did it for me. She did it for me. I can do it for him. Because I do think that like telling your kids that you trust them is the biggest gift, because we've watched them make so many bad mistakes and judgment calls and their frontal cortex isn't like, why would we trust them?
Yeah.
And at the same time, there's different levels of trust. So if we can be like, no, I trust that everything's gonna be okay. You're on your own path. I'm here to support you. And if you're going to fall apart and you're going to be able to do that, come back to me. But if I'm telling you how you should live your life and I'm telling you what's right for you and what's wrong for you and that, oh no, this traumatic thing just happened, you can't leave. Like if I think I know what's best for you, then you're not going to learn how to trust yourself either. And the greatest gift we can give our kids is to be able to trust themselves. And because they look to us for the answers. And then as they get older, they're like, oh, wait, they don't know everything. Maybe it's confusing.
That's so, when you said, no, this traumatic thing just happened to you, you can't leave, which is obviously what we both felt. However, giving it the words to it, that would have been so awful to have that. Like you can't be, it's almost like you can't trust the world. You can't be trusted out there. Stay here. And I like, rather than, okay, go.
What do you need? What do you need, Sarah? What does let's trust what is calling to you. And then instead of being like, that's crazy. You can't get a one-way ticket and go to Mexico like 2 weeks before Y2K. Like there were so many ways that she could have been like, hell no, Sarah.
Yeah. What was it like growing up? Was she always like that? I assume that was a big thing. So I don't think that would be like a one-off, but how was that, having that experience, and how did that impact how you parent?
Huge. Like I do think that that's where a lot of my confidence comes from, is because my mom, she was confident in herself and trusted herself. Self-trust is something that we are not taught. We are literally taught to not trust ourselves. And so intuition and, whether it's trusting the universe or the way my mom did it was not the norm. And because when I did fall, I could go to her without feeling judged. And I could go to her without having that to be a thing, right? Like I didn't have to present in a way that she could receive it. Like I didn't have to think about where I was at in being where I was at with her. I could just be me where I was at, and she would hold me in that space because she trusted all of these layers of ways of being and parenting and mothering and loving, and just because you can do it with anyone. It doesn't have to be your kids, right? So it taught me that I could make mistakes and that actually had nothing to do with who I was. I wasn't unlovable because of the mistakes I made, which we feel like I'm disappointing my mom. She won't like me. She won't love me. I can't tell her because then she'll, think I'm a bad person. And because she had not raised me like that, I was able to differentiate making a mistake, doing something that wasn't great, with being a bad person or not good enough or not lovable, which is why I think that I've had the courage, like that's where courage comes from. Like I know that if I say the wrong thing about race as a white person, or if I'm in a room and it's a multi racial space and I say something that has an impact or that wasn't the right thing to say, or I said it wrong, I believe that I'm still a good human being and I don't have to defend who I am as a person. I can actually focus on the repair, right? So like when we make a mistake, we're either going to go into repair or we're going to go into defense. There's probably more than two. I don't like binary. There's lots of different ways that, you could fight, flight, fawn, whatever. But when I think about why white women specifically don't speak up, a lot of times it's because, well, I don't know what to say and I need to say the right thing. And that is white supremacy culture right there, is needing to say the right thing. Well, Black people, African-American people, like what's the right word? I need to know that before I enter into these conversations. I call bullshit. Like this is more than like it being the right or wrong thing. This is about how do we be as humans together for what's right or wrong in the world. And if that's getting in our way, what's underneath it? And a lot of it is this need to be liked and not to make mistakes because then we won't be liked, the people pleasing, like how are women raised to be silenced? And so we have to do that work ourselves before we can even think about that other work, right? So I hear women being like, well, what can I do, to make an impact? And I usually say, what are you doing internally? Because that's the first step.
Yeah, that's so interesting because that was one of the things I said I want to touch on. And I never made that connection that the people who I see using their voice and speaking up are the people who have done the internal work, so much internal work in order to find that voice and be unafraid to fuck something up and then be able to do that repair if they do.
It's the fear of making mistakes that gets in the way. So then what am I scared of? I think if people are really honest, they're scared of looking bad, being seen as bad, right? But the impact is we harm other people. And so what people say is, well, I don't want to harm anyone else. And I'm like, okay, is that really true? Or is it that you don't want to look bad, or you don't want to be canceled, or you don't want to get into a conversation you can't handle? Let's just be honest about that first. That's okay. You're a human being. I don't want to look bad either. But like, can we sit in that space before you just get righteous about like, oh, I don't want, like, because that your silence and complicity is actually harming other people. So we have to unpack it more.
Yeah. Because I'm thinking myself, I'm a big person for go out and use, like, go do something. But I know for me, when you're saying, what are you scared about? Mine would be for saying the wrong thing and being perceived as a person who is like that. Like, I don't want to be like that. And so sometimes I do, like, I know I shut up and I know I don't have the right words. I actively try to figure it all out. And I know I will never figure it all out, but that is exactly it. I don't want to be perceived by other people as, well, my big thing is I don't want to be wrong. That's one of my things I talk about on here a lot.
I grew up in an alcoholic family and I didn't want to be wrong either. Like I was always in trouble. Like, yes, I hear that. And right and wrong is not helpful. So is it useful? Is it going to serve? I always think about like when we're teaching our little kids how to tie their shoes, right? Like it takes them a while until they can like tie their shoe really well and fast and efficiently. So they're not even thinking about it. And so if we aren't raised having conversations about race and privilege and systems of oppression, which I was raised in the 80s. So I was raised colorblind. Like that was not any topic ever anywhere. Why would we expect ourselves to be able to do it now, right? So like we're already putting an unrealistic expectation on ourselves. We literally have to take baby steps. The only way to take baby steps is to start talking more. And for me, what I would do and what I still do in situations where I'm like, I actually don't know that much about this topic, but this is what I think. So I'll just like kind of put a buffer on it. Like I might say the wrong thing here, but this is what I think. This is what I've heard. This is what I've heard someone else talking about, but I might say the wrong. So I kind of give myself a little bit of a break so the person listening to me maybe has a little bit more grace, so that if I then do say something that is offensive or something, that they'll maybe be more open to correcting me. Not that that's their job, right? But I think it's that humbling. We're supposed to know. Let's call bullshit on that. We don't know what we don't know until we know. And how do we learn? Like all of these things create an opportunity, and it's hard. And so really it's waking up and being like, am I willing to do some hard work today? Yes or no? And if maybe it's a no today, but if it's a yes, then what does that look like? And where can I take a baby step? And then how do I, like who are my people to go to if I do make a mistake? Like I think it's thinking forward too, because if the goal is to not make mistakes or to not say the wrong thing, that's the wrong goal. Like how about like, I'm going to do this work because I live in an all white world and I don't like the way it looks, or I don't like the way other people are being treated, but I don't know how. Well, then we practice it, but we have to be willing to then put some pieces in place so that we can do it without just giving up. I've seen a lot of people just give up. Like they get into one situation and that it blows up and then they're like, I'm out.
Which it's interesting because if they did the baby steps and they did the work, the internal work first, likely the retreat, that they would have that resiliency built up and probably wouldn't tap out so quickly.
Yeah. And it wouldn't be the thing you're avoiding. Like instead of it's like, I know I'm going to make a mistake. So then what am I going to do when that happens so that I can take care of myself? I can take care of if I did harm somebody, and I can focus on repair, because people don't talk about repair enough. And now I have a plan. And then when I do make a mistake, I'm like, okay, I'm here. I knew it was possible. I knew it was a possibility that I would be in this place. I feel so shitty. I feel horrible. I would like to go home and cry for the rest of the day. And maybe that is my first step, but this is the work.
And that's the way. I love that. Okay. That's it's almost like, okay, if you have zero base of knowledge, that you have to expect that you're going to fuck up. That's almost expected. And then, okay, so if this is going to, this is what I teach people with nutrition and exercise and stuff. It's like, okay, we can make these goals, and somewhere along the line, something is going to happen and they are going to get completely sideswiped. And we have to have a plan for when that happens. And that is exactly what you're speaking is, you don't know what the fuck you're doing. You're going to go and try to find a way to be different. And in doing that, something is going to go awry. And then what is the plan when that happens? And that there's so much freedom in that. There's so much like, yes, this is going to happen and I'm going to create my space for when it does happen, because it's less scary and it feels less big.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's being a human.
I wish people didn't feel like there had to be this level of perfection in everything.
That's white supremacy culture. So literally, if all we're doing like in a season is dismantling perfectionism within ourselves, we are part of the solution of dismantling racism, because you're teaching your kids what it looks like to try and be perfect unless you're dismantling it actively, right? So like there's 12 characteristics of white supremacy culture. So individualism is on it, efficiency, urgency, like there's all of these things, and perfectionism. I'll send you the link.
Please do, yeah.
Because it's like if we were to look at those characteristics and then overlap them with how we live on a day-to-day basis, and we're still living in our white world and we're not necessarily like on the front lines, that is part of dismantling systems of oppression internally, which impacts everyone around us.
Okay. And that's almost it gives people more space to figure out, where do I fit in? Where's my place in this? Because it doesn't necessarily mean they have to be having a loud voice in some place where if they're like, that's not me, here, I can do this internal work. I can do this, and then that will still have an impact on everything around me. And maybe nobody even notices. It's just that you didn't do these other behaviors or things, and you have this positive impact that maybe nobody even notices around you.
And the thing is, once you start doing that work, it snowballs. You don't have to go from A to Z. You can go from A to B, and you can trust that in doing this work, which isn't sexy, nobody's seeing it. I'm not getting pats on the back for this, right? Which is part of the problem, is that we need to be seen as doing good. What if I'm not seen as doing good, but I'm actually doing the work, versus somebody who's refusing to do the internal work because they need to be seen as doing the work. So they're out in the world doing the work, actually causing more harm.
And really the non-sexy work that's where it's at.
Yeah. Part of that practice, then you can't not look at how you were parented, how you experience the education system, what it's like to get pulled over by a cop as a white woman. Like, you start to see things that you wouldn't have seen before, and the ability to see it, because then you can't unsee it, then you don't have tolerance for it anymore. But you need to get to that point. And that's when you start to feel stronger and braver. And a little bit of righteousness sometimes can go a long way. I'm more about humanity than righteousness and meeting people where they're at. But when you're looking at systems of oppression versus humans, it grows. And then all of a sudden, you're part of doing really impactful work that matters. And we're raising kids. See, the thing is, our kids are already in that space. A lot of our kids are in that space, but then they're still grappling with the fact that their parents are not necessarily seeing it or supportive, right? So what if we were learning from our kids and then sharing our mistakes with our kids in a way to be better? I feel like there's a huge magic there, because I also know a lot of women who want to be better parents. And it's like, why don't you work on being a better self? Because that will automatically make you a better parent.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. All right. I could talk to you for hours. Thank you so much for being here.
It's been fun. Thank you. Thank you for being so open to diving into whatever direction we end up in.
Usually it's like a choose your own adventure. All right. So where can people connect with you?
SaraAlvarado.com is the best. SaraAlvarado. I'm on the socials. I'm not as much as I used to be, but I'm definitely still there. I think those are the best places. My book is at local bookstores. It's at the library. It's on Amazon. And it's a great beach read.
I need a beach.
But you learn some stuff. Yes, we do need beaches right now. So yeah, that's the best place to find me.
Wonderful. And we will have that all linked in the show notes. So thank you so much, Sara. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Have a beautiful day.
You too. Today's Badasses in the Community guest is Molly Vanderlin. She is an avid reader and passionate about building connections. In 2023, she founded the Madison Chapter of the International Silent Book Club, which has been thriving ever since. Welcome, Molly.
Thank you. I'm really excited to be here.
So excited. So tell our listeners, first of all, what is a silent book club and who gets involved in it? Where did it originate? Give us all the details.
First of all, we don't talk. Nobody talks. The silent book club that the Madison Chapter is a part of started about 2012 by two women who used to go to bars and read together. They were best friends, and they started this silent book club because they realized they weren't the only ones that wanted to read but not talk to each other, which sounds like an odd concept, but it really introverts understand it. So anyway, they started it in 2012, and now they have about 1,500 chapters all over the world. And most of those chapters started in the last couple of years. So whatever is happening in the world, this has become really, really big. Basically what it is people who are avid readers like myself who want to be a part of a community or be a part of just action going around, but they don't want to have the homework of reading a book by a particular time. They don't want to be a part of a group where they are constantly picking like romances and this person happens to be, a techie and doesn't want that. So it is a group that gets together. The Madison chapter will meet at libraries, different cafes around Madison and surrounding areas as well. We get together for 2 hours and we're really just sitting at a cafe and we're reading by ourselves. And I don't understand it, but there is this energy and excitement that happens when you're together, even though you're not talking. So I know the concept sounds a little bizarre, but if you get it, you get it. I've always hated that saying, but that's basically it. So the website that we have, and I'll get into that information, but we put in where we're going to meet, what time, and then people can just show up anytime during that. And you can usually tell where we're sitting because we have books in front of us. I usually have a sign that says Silent Book Club, and you just sit down, start reading. You can definitely talk if you want to. This is not some group that we, will hit you on top of the head. Then usually after about an hour or so of reading, then we get together and talk about the books that we're reading or just talking about things in general. It is not a mandatory thing. Usually at the meetings, I will kind of feel the room, so to speak, feel what the cafe is like, feel what the group is like. If people just seem in their own world or the cafe seems very particular about being quiet or anything, I don't do it. We just sort of, say, hey, it was nice seeing you. But if it feels good, then I usually will just do an introduction. I usually do a free raffle for a free book or a book thing, like a bookmark or a mug. And then people, if they want, can talk about the book that they're reading. It's very simple.
Super simple. Who is this for? Who comes to this? Who are the people there?
We currently have almost 2,000 members, and we started in 2023. Of those 2,000 members, we typically see the same 20 people coming to meetings, and they range from 18-year-olds to 88-year-olds. It's really varied. Some people have actually brought their kids to it because depending on the location of the read, they can just bring their kids can color or whatever. College kids, retired people. I will say the majority are women, but we do have some very interesting men who have joined up that I'm just always very happy to see. So anybody can join.
As an introvert that struggles with any sort of group, this is such a wonderful concept and a neat idea and way to get people involved in their community in a way that is such low pressure. There's no time. You show up at a certain time, but you don't have to do the book at a certain time. It's not a certain, like you said, it's such a cool idea. I am so grateful for what you are doing because it feels this need. There's so many things that people can go out and do and get involved. Like every episode now I am interviewing people on how can we get involved in the community. And this is when I saw this and I read about it, I was like, yeah, it doesn't cost anything. You can just go and be with people. And then if you want to chat, you can. I love this so much. Like, I'm so excited.
I do too. Thank you. And I wanted to just kind of say this too. At the last meeting that we had, the hour went by. I didn't feel like it was a conducive atmosphere to talking. So just sort of said goodbye to people. And I stayed and read. And then there was a table down from me of 4 women who had just met that day, felt the same way that you do and that I do. I don't know that many people, and they stayed an extra hour and a half just talking and laughing. And when it was done, it was done. And building community. That's a big thing for me too. And I get so happy when I see people that did not know each other and then have found this bond over what they thought was a nerdy aspect of themselves or something like that.
But we're all nerdy. If anybody's like, yes, I want to be with people, but I don't want to be with people. What's the awkward conversation like? And this is like your calling. Like if there was a calling for this group of people, this is the call.
I love it. Yeah. It's so fantastic. And anytime a new person comes in, somebody else from the group will like take them aside and tell that, it's a great community. And the people that I have met so far have been so cool, and people I wouldn't meet otherwise.
Yeah. Oh, I won't talk to anybody anywhere.
That's me.
Here I am. Let's create community. And when I'm out there, I will not talk to you. Okay, two things. One, how can people, if you are because people listen outside of Madison, but for those in Madison, how do they find you?
The only way currently is a Facebook page. This will change, but right now it is Silent Book Club of Madison, Wisconsin. Not all one word. So if you put that on Facebook, you'll pop up to the first page, and it will have an events tab, and that will tell you when our next things are and a little bit about that particular day. You do not have to be a member to come. I mean, it's so low stress.
Yes, that's neat.
And it's also for people who are outside of Madison. We are trying to different places around the surrounding areas as well. But we do about 2 to 3 reads, I call them, a month. And we try to do West Side, East Side, Central. And we're not going to make everybody happy, but we make them pretty darn close to happy.
Excellent. Okay. For those outside of Madison, how do they either find a local chapter, or if they're like, this is my jam, I want to do what Molly did, and I want to create a local chapter if there isn't one here, how do they do those things?
The website for the international group is silentbookclub.com. And it will take you up and sort of give you an introduction to the 2 amazing women who started this. And then there is a tab that says start your own chapter. And if you are in the Madison area, that you can certainly start another one. There's no problem there, but you can start them anywhere. I mean, I saw one in Thailand. There's Africa. I don't know what country, but they're just all over. It's really cool. So it's
because there's people like us everywhere.
There are, I know.
Molly, it was really nice talking to you and getting to meet you. And thank you, truly thank you, because you are giving a space and an energy. Like you said, there's an energy to it. And I can totally see that. Thank you for doing that. I work with people all different kinds of, mostly women, but they are siloed. And they all say, I want to have community. I want to have this. And they don't really have a space for it. And you are providing a space for them to show up in whatever capacity and then create conversation should they so choose. But either way, they're going to be feeling connected by sharing the same experience with people around them. So thank you, thank you, thank you. It is so wonderful.
Well, thank you. To me, it's about the people. So thank you very much for this.
Yes. Awesome. Okay. Everything will be in the show notes that you can find either the local Madison chapter or go out, find one that is local to you, or go create your own. Thank you, Molly.
Thank you.
If you are loving this podcast, I would be so grateful for your vote in the Best of Madison 2025. The first round of voting is from February 1st to the 28th, and you can vote one time each day. To vote, all you need to do is follow the link in the show notes, and you will find the Arts and Entertainment category, and then Best Local Podcast. Just write in Spirit of a Badass. Thank you so much for your continued support and allowing this podcast to reach more people. Spirit of a Badass is a Lit Path Studios podcast and is produced by Jamie Gale and Alecia Jacobson. Music by Shane Ivers. We'll be back with another inspiring interview. Until then, keep your spirits high and your energy badass.